Hey everyone, welcome to podcast edition. Oh my God, let me start over. Hey everyone, welcome to Podcast Insider Special Edition, and I have with me Elsie Escobar. Elsie is world famous, been podcasting since 2006, and the reason I asked Elsie to come on today is she has a very, very integral handle on what's going on with women in podcasting. Elsie, just as a starter, why don't you give everyone just a quick intro for those that may not know you?
Hi. So I'm Elsie Escobar, like you just mentioned. I've been around since 2006. I started podcasting with a yoga podcast, of all things, with audio yoga podcast way back in the day, because of my vast enthusiasm for podcasting. I ended up working for Libsyn, and I've had my hands in the Libsyn ecosystem since 2007. And I started off sort of as a community manager there, and I was called, or I self directed myself, I guess, as the podcast happiness expert, because that's what I felt I was doing in the front lines, talking to a lot of people on social and building community and whatnot. And currently I'm the director of community and content over there. That said, I also did a lot of things outside of Libsyn, one of them being I co-founded She Podcast, which was or is the largest community for women and non-binary individuals to come together and talk. It's primarily a Facebook group now. And we did in the past do a live conference that went around to do that. And, I've always been a proponent of anybody who is often underserved and not seen. And I hope that I had a little bit of something to do in uplifting some voices out there.
So you've been there probably just as long as Rob been, yeah?
Yes, Rob's the one that hired me,
Oh, okay.
actually. So Rob offered me the job at the one of the podcast portable, I think it was a podcast portable media expo
Right.
in Ontario, California, which is when, yeah, I came via train, actually. I took the train from LA to Ontario. And I was there for a little bit, and I kind of sat down with Rob, and he offered me the job.
That's probably an easy prelude into the kind of the first topic I wanted to get into. I know what the landscape was, but I want to hear it from a woman's perspective on the early landscape for ladies in podcasting. What did it feel like in 2006 for you?
Well, I happen to be just really welcomed by the community, especially in LA, right? There happened to have been a strong community in Los Angeles via the LA podcasters, and our, co inductee for the Podcast Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
Lance Anderson,
Yeah.
ran that community. And I found them. I don't even know how I found them online. So I got a chance to meet all of the LA podcasters, which at that time were really what kind of well known in podcasting, given the fact that there was like two of us. No, I'm just kidding. But it was just like it was like a tiny little amount of people, right? You kind of knew every podcaster, which is a lot to say. And they were opened their themselves to me. They were really welcoming to me. And I started listening to a lot of podcasts, and that conference was there, right? So I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to that conference. And I was kind of struck by the fact that there weren't many people that were like me, right?
Sure.
And at that time, I reveled in it because I was working in Hollywood. And in Hollywood, that's not the case. And in Hollywood, I was put in a place where I was not allowed to move outside of, right? This is who you are. And they told me who I was, and there was no way for me to be anything outside of what Hollywood told me I was. When I stepped into the podcasting space, I just got a chance to be me.
That's
right?
where, that's interesting perspective because if we think about it, podcasting from the day one has been open in more ways than one. So that to me is kind of a bit of an epiphany because I was always worried that there was not enough ladies in the early days being there to share their voice. Where as you, when you came in, even though that was heavy male dominated content at the time, you said, I can just do what I want to do. I can be me. That,
Yeah.
that's
And you
beautiful.
know, I remember walking in there and I didn't buy a ticket to go into the conference, right? I was on the show floor, which at that time, I think you could go like in just the
Yeah,
big show
maybe.
floor where
Yeah.
you could walk around and you didn't have to have a ticket to go on the show floor. I couldn't go into any of the sessions and things. And Lance had a booth there for the LA podcasters, and he was having a lot of panels recording at that time, right? So he saw me walking and he was like, you need to be on this session with women in podcasting. So I was on this women in podcasting panel when I had started podcasting, like, I don't know, 2 months before,
Yeah.
right? And it was like, okay. And I was on this panel of women. I can't off the top of my head remember exactly who was on that panel, but I felt at that moment so seen and and empowered. And the women on the panel, I remember, were all very different. I'm not saying that there wasn't, obviously there was like very few of us there.
Right.
And the reason that I probably was pulled off, like literally on stage, because I was like, oh, look, there's another one. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It was literally just, we were very scarce. But that said, though, the opportunities to call attention to ourselves was there as well. So I called a lot of attention at that time because not only was I a woman, but also I was podcasting about yoga, which was also very different. And that called a lot of attention also, which to the point of even iTunes at that time, I rose up the ranks in the iTunes, charts pretty fast, and I was featured a lot because of the uniqueness of the work that I was putting out there, which was an audio yoga class. And that was very different than any other podcast that was being put out there, which was generally chat shows, co hosted shows. There was storytelling and, audio books and things like that, but nothing was like a yoga class. There were classes, there was a lot of education, right? All of those things were happening. But this was a unique thing that kind of went, wait, what's your podcast about? And so that just I kind of cemented in people's minds as to what I was doing at that time.
I think that first year, I even had a bit of a moment. I was still active duty Navy at the time,
Oh my gosh.
and the Navy had really we had worked side by side with women, and there was don't ask, don't tell, that policy that
Yeah.
was going on at the time. But I remember when I went to that first podcast event, PME or whatever it was called, that I met these two guys from, I believe they're from New York or from the East Coast, and they were the Feast of Fools. They were a gay couple, and they were doing a gay podcast. And I thought, man, right off the bat, we're hitting it. And it made me kind of realize, even at that very early stage, that there is now this opportunity for voices to be heard that have, in its sense, been suppressed or not allowed their message to get out, or whatever the story may be on each individual person. So it excited me because I kind of had a glimpse into, and maybe I didn't fully realize it, but it was kind of one of those, oh, wow, interesting, cool. And that's why when we did the podcast awards, we made sure that there was a LGBTQ community, a category immediately, because we knew that group was also represented. But, part of your personal growth and journey through podcasting, what really drove you to the point where you had this mission saying, I want more women podcasting? I don't know. Was that the epiphany moment, or what was the journey that got you there to building this massive community of women that are and marginalized communities that was, where did that origin story come from?
It wasn't at that time, like I said before,
Yeah,
because at the beginning, I did find a sense of freedom from the shackles
sure.
of Hollywood, right? Which is very not what podcasting was at that time.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it wasn't that. I felt a huge freedom. And then I also got a lot of opportunities, and I got a job. I worked with podcasters. So there was a lot of joy that came from that. I think it started to really pop up when is it called, it may be a commodization of education and podcasting started to come out, when the groups really started to grow on Facebook or on social. And there were a lot of more communications around how to start a podcast.
In 2006, Facebook wasn't here yet, so we had to wait for Facebook to come.
Yes,
but yeah,
we were waited
yeah.
a little bit more. So I'm thinking probably around 2010, 2011, 2012-ish time frame. So I had been doing this for a while, and I started to see a lot of folks starting to teach podcasting to other people or give advice about podcasting to other people that I felt were possibly not qualified to do it and or were way too complicated.
Yeah.
And so I became less outspoken and started to doubt myself a lot more. Like, do I really know what I'm saying? Like, these guys feel like they know all their tech. And so I kind of thought, like, I will let them teach. I will let them do that thing. It sounds like they're smarter than me. And then, we kept going into conferences and things like that. And in community with other women, I realized how much I knew. And I realized also that they appreciated the information I was sharing with them in the simplicity in which I stated it. And then I thought, oh, I do know what I'm talking about. So it was in the conversations where it was reflected to me, you are smart. You do know what you're saying. You actually have a lot of insight that isn't often shared. And then that's when I thought, oh, wow, I guess I should speak up more. And we started to find out that in community, we learned better by the things that we were sharing with one another versus being what I would call mansplained in a lot of these Facebook groups.
Yep.
Where when one of us would ask, what microphone should I use? We would get this long list of, you shouldn't do this, or you can't, how dare you do that, or do this and you can't do this. And it's like, I don't even know what you guys are saying. You just have to tell me the name of
you give me three choices and three price ranges, right?
Yeah, that's it. And why it's good, right?
Right.
And so those are the things that were really complicated and that's when I realized, oh, I felt intimidated by the answers I was seeing out there. And it made me feel quiet and unseen and not talk about myself. This is the same thing that's happening to these other people. And that's when Jess and I went to the New Media Expo and got a chance to actually meet each other for the very first time. We also connected with a lot of other women who happened to have started podcasts around that time, which was like the 2014, lift, right? There was a lot of people that got into podcasting around 2014. There was a lot of it was an inflection point in looking back of the podcasting history as a whole. And so we came together and we realized what a good time we had. We realized how smart all of us were. The advice that they gave was spot on, way above and beyond what we were hearing on stage by these men. And so we thought, oh my God. So Jess was like, I want to create this Facebook group. And she started the process of that idea because she wanted to stay in community. And I knew basically almost all the women that were podcasting at that time. So I'm like, come and join, come and join, come and join. And it kind of blew up because the need was so much there where we felt safe to ask what we thought were stupid questions and not be overly spoken down to or perceived as we were being spoken down to. So maybe that wasn't the intention, but the language in which we were spoken to felt it was like a whole other language. It was like, I don't even know what you just said, dude.
In those early days, there was a lot of tech bros,
Yeah.
And me included, and it was very, I think what we always were was very methodical, and a lot of people were very set in their ways and the way they should create content. And I've long learned to understand it. There is no one way to do a podcast. But it's more about, again, the ongoing stories. So this was kind of the genesis moment of starting She Podcast and building this group of ladies. What was your advice? I'm always curious about this because I'm a big brand builder. What was your advice to the ladies in establishing their unique voice and building their brand? What was that discussion kind of about?
Yeah, what was really interesting is that at the beginning, we really just wanted them behind the mic. So the technical pieces and the getting over yourself, meaning you becoming your own worst enemy, was probably the utmost focal point of that community, because what we kept hearing back over and over and over was, do I really know what I'm talking about? I'm afraid to get behind the mic. I don't know if I can do this. I hate the sound of my own voice.
We all do.
Should I even? I don't know if I should. So it's this like constant imposter syndrome that's happening within the community. And getting the women to a point where they feel like you are enough so that they're confident is really the key, because the brand and the voice, once the women get there, is the least amount of work they need, because that's one of the differences that I've seen within, if you're putting just gender into the mix, the messaging that we get as like underrepresented genders within society is that you need to be quiet and or you don't belong here. And so when we are given the chance to step up, it feels very scary, and it feels like there are we have to fight within our own selves. So if we get that fight out, once we are there, the clarity is spot on. So I never had to give a lot of these women advice on brand and voice because it was spot on. It was the fear of being heard. It was the fear of sounding dumb. It was the fear of not being enough. And the criticism that you get, because, I remember with the podcast, with the feed, the official Libsyn podcast, I started that podcast. It was my baby. I conceived it. I've been putting it out. Obviously, Rob is a huge asset because of his brain. But I also knew he has a job that requires a lot of time outside of podcast production.
Yep.
And so I thought, how can I build a podcast that is able to get him in, and I will take care of the rest, right? So I kind of conceived this conversation that I knew that he would deliver on. But I remember when I established that show, I did an episode 0, right? So I basically recorded what it was going to be about, what we were going to be talking about. And it was short. It was like 10 minutes. Or shorter than that, actually. It was an intro and I put it out. I submitted it into all the places. I think it was like the first two, maybe it was like two or three reviews right away.
Wow.
Who
On,
is
on
this
an
woman?
episode 0. Wow.
On episode 0, where I can actually, I don't even want to go back because it really does strike me. Like it really made me feel awful. And anyway, at episode 0, who is this woman? Why isn't Rob there? I hate her voice.
Oh my
Who does
God.
she think she is? Your audio sucks. All of that on episode 0. And I thought like, wow. And this was not the first time. This was also the same thing that happened when I launched Elsie's yoga class. The first review was a scathing negative review that I had to send at that time to my podcast Yoda, who is Victor Cahiel. At that time, he was
Oh,
doing the typical PC user, is how I
yeah.
got to know him. And I told him, and I was like, I was so upset. And I go, look, and this is what happened because he really pushed me to do that podcast. And he went out there and he put on a positive review for me. And I thought 2 times of me starting a podcast. The first review on iTunes was a scathing, horrible review about me and my voice.
That just takes the wind out of your sails when that
Yeah,
happens, especially if it's just on an
absolutely.
episode 0. You're just introducing the show, and then you got some poser that comes in and has a comment like that.
Yeah,
You know,
it
I,
does.
I, believe me, I've been through my share of individuals. Matter of fact, one of them I wish was still listening to one of my shows. Sal, he caused me quite a bit of entertainment over the years, even though he hated me. But so if we look at that to now, and again, I don't want to fast forward through everything, but
Yeah, yeah.
are women facing the same? Do you feel it's the same challenge today? But in here, I'm gonna preface that we're about 50-50 in content right now. Matter of fact, I think
Yeah.
ladies are edging men in creating new shows. I think they have
Yeah.
a slight edge,
Hmm.
um, which tells me that we've really moved a long, long ways. But do you still hear the self doubt in the groups? Is that
Oh yeah.
still hear that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's out, and it's the self-doubt continues across the board in the creator communities. So it's not just in podcasting. It's across the board. And which is why communities are so important
Mm,
because in my work, one of the things that I label myself is as a mentor, and the offerings that I have when people hire me, and or I have a group that I lead. It's a mentorship experience, and people pay me for this.
sure.
And what we do is I'm there basically as of a reflection back to their work, right? So I don't teach them how to do anything. They are already brilliant people. And sometimes they just need to get a little bit of clarity to see themselves and how amazing they're doing. Obviously, there's depth into that. There's a lot of tactical and strategy and approach. But if I really were to condense it, it really is giving them permission to shine and to feel confidence and to do it in a safe space. And I know that those are such like little vocabulary terms that you see all over the place. And it happens though, right? When you provide a space, just a space where you can let go and not feel like you have to fight back all the time, you develop this depth of confidence and understanding. And yeah, I really do know what I'm talking about. And it continues to move forward. So yeah, that is, I feel, one of the biggest differences still within genders and being able to get the right advice. And when I say the right advice and or guidance, I don't mean that there is a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, but I mean that the person that is helping you can give you what you need versus here's the recipe of how you're supposed to do this thing, and you have to follow this list. And that is what is the hardest, I feel, discerning for marginalized genders, because we tend to have other things that we have to deal with that sometimes men have the privilege of being able to do that.
Right.
Here's one thing, a studio. Like you right now, you see more light, you see a nice like sort of setup. As of around 2021, mind you, remember, I started in 2006. As of 2021, I now have a place where I can just come in, turn everything on, and it's ready.
Right.
The rest of the time, I was podcasting on my bed. I was tearing things up and down every single time. I was carrying I had a little pouch, a little like mobile setup. I was recording podcast interviews outside my kids' classes, like in the corner of any hallway that I could. I got adept at being able to do content anywhere and everywhere and move it and put it away because my children were going to destroy it. Like finally they're teenagers. They're not going to pull cords out of things. And I don't have to be, or they are coming into the scene. Like, I mean, I breastfed through almost the entire time when we were recording She Podcast. I had a child breastfeeding and I had to like potty training in front of me. Like there were just so many different things that I had to deal with that oftentimes I feel it wasn't the case for a lot of men, where they could go into their, I guess, basement or whatever. That's the picture that you get, like the basement and the podcaster and the dark recording. I couldn't do it at night. I had to do everything in the middle of the day. There's no night to record. There's none of that.
Yeah, my situation is probably a clear case of that. And I had a spare bedroom. It kind of became the studio. It was, a place that was off limits during recording time. I taped all the switches to make sure the kids couldn't come in and, move the switches or change the knobs or anything, So, I had to child-proof as well. But you're right. I did have this kind of dedicated space. So it's an interesting perspective that I've never really thought about before, because I'm trying to think, okay, if my spouse had been wanting to do a podcast, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because then you become the supporting agent, I guess is the best way to say it. A few years ago, I was able to go to Ignite in Saudi Arabia, and I had really been kind of hesitant in going. And they brought a great mix of men and women from all over the world to that event, and I really had no idea what to expect. And I was thinking, this is going to be like Podcast Movement, the first PME, where it's going to be 90% men, and I was blown away. There was probably more women at the event than there were men. And we had scheduled one-on-one sessions, and the one-on-one sessions became so popular, it turned to 1 to 50. And it wasn't just me. It was the ladies and we had every conference room that they had this event full. The 3 days of the event, talking to participants, and the majority, high 80% of the people that were in those rooms were ladies, and they were asking questions that I'm sure came up in conversations you had. Should I use my real name? Am I safe to talk about this story, about this life event that has happened to me? And it made me, I felt like I am so underqualified to answer some of these questions. And I thought if I had you there or a couple of other, but the ladies were great. So the ladies were able to come in and make a commentary where maybe I wasn't have the right perspective to give the right answer. So I think it's true that we're both different. Men and women are both different, and there's different perspectives. And I think this is why you guys were, so beyond successful in building this community. When I guess I get into more nuts and bolts types of questions, but does the business and monetization strategies differ? Do you see an A/B, or is it about the same?
I think it's about the same. And also, I do feel that there is, um, when women get into behind the microphone, they do, like I said before, their passion and their vision and the clarity around their message is so spot on,
Yeah.
right? And the issues that arise with at least the demographic that I serve is the deep love for their community and the fact that they don't want to ask for money.
Mm.
And that's the harder part because everything is done from a depth of connection to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Where the meaning and the value and community and like all those things are so embedded into sharing that the ask when building a business is harder.
Right.
Is this too much money to ask? Is anybody going to buy my thing? I don't even know how to do this. So they kind of undercut themselves and or they go like, hey, if you find any value with the things that I'm doing, just and you're like, what did she say?
Right.
And so they go, you can, and so you don't really hear what the point is. And so I have to keep that. So it goes back again. Claiming our space is probably the biggest goal that I still work towards with anybody that I work with. There are some folks who are really spot on all that stuff. And it's such a pleasure to do that, of course. But there's also the other people who are doing phenomenal work and they're like, I don't know if I should do that. And I'm like, make the ask. You got to do it.
Yep.
Put in a commercial. Tell them to sign up.
Tell them to give me your money.
Give me your money. Ask straight up.
Yeah.
People want to give you money or they want to support you. You matter. And it's this crazy thing because they do it for other people. They are champions for others. So we're really amazing at championing one another's work, but not our own. And so that's one of the differences that I see because you don't often see women pitching themselves. And I can say that when you do see a woman pitching herself, she's had to work very hard to do that. And even when she does that, she still gets pushed back, right? Where it's like, well, you shouldn't be selling your thing. And it's like, I'm trying, right? So it's this push and pull. But that's like the biggest thing that I think I see in terms of building a business. But outside of that, it's hard. It's hard to build in these parts right now.
I think it's hard overall for everyone to build.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's hard to build. Oh, yeah. Right now, it is hard overall it is. It's hard.
And it's interesting. I listen to about 100 new podcasts every 2 weeks, and some of them I only listen to for 5 minutes. It's like I get in there and I'm like, oh no, so I've done this for many years. And one thing I can say about the shows that I'm listening to, and it's a kind of a random pick. I don't go and look for, I just pick shows, and it is what it is. Maybe a woman, be a man, maybe, whatever the flavor. And the thing that I hear, to your point, is definitely on the men's shows, they're definitely more assertive. So and on the lady shows, they're more informative. It gets deeper, and sometimes it gets really deep, and I understand why, based upon the topics that are being covered. But it also depends on the type of content too, the type of show, on where things are. But there's plenty of shows, don't get me wrong, that there's some very assertive, very strong, they know what their ask is on both sides of the fence. And then it does, there's on both sides of the fence, there's folks that are not as assertive too. But it's probably bad to generalize, but be honest with you, I get a lot more emotion out of the shows from the ladies than from the guys. A lot more emotion.
And I have seen a rise in the assertiveness. So again, you're right. We should not generalize.
Yeah,
And
I don't want to. Yeah.
overall, there is that the depth, right, from a lot of the content, and there's the other side where I have seen, or at least folks that I listen to, where there are solo shows, women led, who are very much on point, very strongly spoken,
Yep.
very in depth, and assertive, to your point,
Yeah.
right? So there are those aspects of it, and it is incredibly, I think, inspiring, because I'm not like that naturally, right? So I am softer in a lot of different ways. It takes work for me to assert a position, and to be clear. Like, I have to prepare. I have to prepare my mind. I have to prepare my words. I have to prepare my intention. My whole energy has to be ready for that, because my natural way is not that. It's to bolster people up. It's to be the thing that bounces off, right? You bounce off of me and I help you shine. And I'm just there to lead, to move things along, And so it is harder for me to put myself in that position. But there's some women out there and so I learn from that. I learn from hearing assertive women, smart women who can nail a sentence and period, right?
Well,
And that is where representation is so important, because we get to hear someone that's not like me, a woman who is not like me, speaking in ways that make me go, wow, that is great. I want to emulate that. And podcasting has always been that. And I know that when you started podcasting, I'm sure you listened to shows and you were like, oh, I like the way they did that. I like that transition. I really love the style of that show, the way they formatted it. And so you are inspired by other podcasters. It's the same way when we hear people that we want to be like. And it hits home in a deeper way when they are like you. And yeah.
And it's given me a different perspective over time, listening to all these shows. And I think that, what's the best way to say it? I think we're better off with, well, it's just an obvious. We are definitely better off with this variety of perspectives, variety of messages, variety of voices. I really smile when I go to events now, and we have all colors of the spectrum, all different demographics. And these folks have this ability now. A story I've told many times. I was at Dragon Con, and we had a little thing in the back. We had sponsored the session, and I'm just hanging out in the back like I always do, and just kind of keep my mouth shut and try to listen as much as I can. It's not my nature not to talk. But a group came in, and they had been protesting in Atlanta. And they were there to talk about their experience. And it was the room. I think I was the only white guy in the whole room. And they were talking about their event where they had went out into Atlanta. They were having a protest. The news van showed up. And who did they go talk to? They went to talk to some white guy on the street corner. And it really, really, really upset them, because they were trying to make a point and trying to protest for a cause. And they took matters in their own hands after that and created their own podcasts about this movement. And they talked about the success they had in understanding that the mainstream media wasn't their friend, that in order to get their voice out, they had to use this medium called podcasting to be able to put it out there and not have these controls. And it really made me smile, because I realized at that point, and going back to what you had said earlier, your experience coming from Los Angeles, we'd kind of come full circle, and we'd gotten to the point where this is a medium that gives everyone a voice. And I don't know about you, but that just makes me, makes me almost want to do backflips. I think that's more important than almost anything in the podcasting space at this point.
Yeah, I think that the challenge that I see now is it's the focal point, right? It's the awareness of all of these other podcasts. It is the bringing people up that need to be seen and heard, because in terms of my job that I feel is my job in the podcasting industry, is to constantly open a door for somebody else that needs to be there. That is just instrumental in everything that I do. If somebody says, hey, who should be on this panel? If somebody says, do you have any speakers that would speak about this? If somebody says, who needs to be, given this award? If at any single time, I have, as you know, many friends.
Sure.
I have a lot of them are white men, for sure. Yep. And they are people that are smart, and they're qualified, and they are amazing, and they need to be heard, and they have lots of things to support each other, whatever. You might be the one that needs to be asked to be on stage, but my job is not to make you shine.
Right.
So I'm not going to open a door for you, Todd.
Of course.
Unless it's absolutely imperative and you are the one.
Right.
Because most of the time I'm going to look at the people that I know do not get access and are constantly going to be overlooked. And I'm going to fight tooth and nail to get that person on that panel. And I'm going to pass the baton to that other person that's over here who's never had an opportunity to be on stage and is amazing. I'm going to share the podcasts that are in my ears that are not hosted by white men. And yeah, a lot of them are in my rotation.
Yeah.
But that's still not, it's not there. Somebody else is going to bring them up. Like, I don't have to fight for that. But I'm the only one that's going to give voice to these people.
Do you feel that influence in women in podcasting is growing, or are we still struggling?
We're still struggling. We are still struggling. I'm still, this is so sad. I'm still the token woman. Let's get Elsie on the panel.
Yeah.
And it's,
but I know a lot of really successful women in podcasting that should be in these panels too. Yeah.
When are they being asked to go specifically speak on these panels? When are you going to find somebody new, right? There's always a new, and that's the point. It's like, it is our job to find those people. It's not for you to go like, hey, does anybody else know blah, 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 blah. Like, no, you got to go and find out about these women.
Yeah.
These other people who are doing amazing work. And again, I am raw. It is, I mean, I'm the token, and it hurts. It hurts, Todd. It hurts when I get the last minute invite, because I know what happened.
Because I
know that they submitted a panel and they were asked, you have no women.
Yep.
Oh, let's get Elsie.
That's right.
And it hurts.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you should have thought of me first.
Well, or you should have been, or you should be the panel lead picking the people you want on your panel.
Right. And listen, I work my butt off on trying to get but anyway, that said, it is a lot. It is work. It is work, because you sit there and I go like, okay, I need to have the right mixture. And I spend a lot of time with who am I going to ask? How am I going to make this? And I make it a priority. And it's a lot of time and resources in me to be able to do that. And mind you, I always bring it. If you have me on a panel, right? I know what I'm talking about. I understand what the job is. And at the same time, it's still so painful for that to happen.
Go ahead.
Anyway, go ahead. No. I'm
one thing that I have done is for certain conferences, I've stepped back a little bit, because I can learn from other voices. And, I don't get to pick who's on. Obviously, Rob and I do our thing at PodFest where we do the live show, and Rob does a good job of having the diversity on the panel. But the big events now, I've more stepped back, because I feel that there's a lot of people in the podcasting space that have lots of new, cool ideas. They don't need to hear from me. I've done this. I have success. I don't have to be in the limelight. I want to be able to hear other people's good ideas. But at the same time, sometimes, to your point, we sit in the panel and we go, oh no, they just said that. Please don't follow that advice. So, I think it's our jobs as, senior statespeople in the podcasting space to make sure that we try to at least have a semblance of rational advice that we can give. And I think, you're serving a community where you're giving rational advice, uplifting voices. I think we all have to continue to do that, to keep away the so-called consultant that, is going to give you the advice that's going to have a super successful show who never built one themselves. You have built a successful show with the feed. Everyone talks about it. You've done a good job mentoring that. And as you said, it's your baby. I didn't know it was actually your baby until today. I didn't know that you were the one that was the source of it. And of course, your yoga show. How long did that last? How many years did you end up doing that?
I didn't actually do it for very long, actually. It was 2. I did 100 episodes. And the reason, and again, and I think that this is something, so imagine why I pod faded. I pod faded because I gave birth.
Oh,
I had a baby.
Babies are busy.
And
yeah.
I thought I'm going to keep going, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what you do as a new person who's going to give birth. You think you are going to be magical, and you will do all the things. And then the reality hits you, and you go, no.
Yeah, something has to give. Yeah.
Because, but again, also the show was based on me teaching live classes. So I was teaching to a live class in front of me, and I would record that class, and I would put that online, right? I would publish that as an episode. Where when I had my baby, I couldn't teach anymore, or I had like one class that I could go teach, and that class sucked. Not sucked. It was a good class, but it wasn't a good class to hear, because I used to have the privilege of teaching 13 to 15 classes a week.
Wow.
And so I would pick, that was a great audio class. Like I was very clear with my voice. We didn't use too many props. There was not, there was like lots of things, because the point was live to tape. There wasn't editing. So if I had then I was like, that's a really solid class. I'll put this one out. I didn't have that. I had like 2 classes to teach. And then sometimes I had to teach like a super basic class with lots of that was not going to be good audio. It's just not good. And so I had to stop. And then I thought, I'll teach to no one. I'll just record my voice and teach.
What do you feel?
I was so tired.
Yeah.
I was too tired.
There's with kids, you're in a perpetual tired.
Yes.
Until at least they can get up and make their own breakfast, and then there's a little relief.
Yeah.
Maybe not even then. What do you feel is the future outlook and opportunities specifically for women?
I think that we do things in a very multimodal way, which is my new word. Multimodal is I think a lifestyle that women wear well, meaning we can use a tool in 50,000 different ways. We are inherently understand the value of a piece of content, and we can diversify the execution of that piece of content, meaning, the video to audio, the audio to video, the blog post, the writing, the newsletters, the images. So there is a cohesiveness and an understanding of how to package things beautifully. And so I do feel that there is a way for us the creativity doesn't ever stop. So there is going to be a lot of innovation starting first with a lot of women testing new things, not because they're being creative, but because they must be creative, which is a difference, right? Because you have the kids, or you have the older parents, or you have to juggle so many different things where the solutions that are being presented in order to create meaningful content is not your solution. So you're going to have to figure it out. And
Yeah.
out of that framework of like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, comes the creativity. And we excel at that. So that is a huge, amazing opportunity for women to continue to do things. And we go under the radar at understanding how things fit together. And that is so important to developing content nowadays, how the newsletter is an opportunity to build in business, how being able to position that newsletter within a podcast works towards lead generation, how short form content really works when building community in XYZ settings. And they're more up to date in the understanding of online communications in their communities and how they are getting together. So that is an advantage because we step back and we watch and we lurk and we learn by osmosis.
I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing I'm going to say is the ability to pivot, I feel, for women is easier than for men. And again, I'm overgeneralizing.
I know
a lot here. But from my seeing, especially with marginalized genders, because they've had to work so very, very hard, right, to just exist, that the nose that the world gives you allows for a deeper creative expression that serves their community and serves themselves in a way that a lot of folks with privilege don't get an opportunity to do, because everything happens. Everything is just there. You just have a fancy iPhone camera. You just have a room for you to record. So, and we have to figure out so many different ways in which we can do new things and wonderful things. And that's an asset for us, for sure.
I think one last question for you, and advice. What is your advice for an aspiring, I guess, any podcaster, or primarily the ladies?
I feel it's as simple as the same thing that I'm sure you say all the time, which is just start.
Just start.
Because getting behind the microphone is a lesson in itself, and it can be a means to an end. Just speaking and giving voice on a consistent basis. So I'm not thinking about building audience, building a business, creating a successful podcast, none of that stuff. Just just doing the thing. The act of podcasting is instrumental in transformative works, in transforming you. And that's what it gave me. It gave me the safety of training wheels to be able to speak out loud. And if you don't do it, if you just have the idea and you don't physically record yourself doing it, you're not going to kinesthetically get that transformation in your body to do what you need to do.
I always tell people, you will find your voice, but you have to start.
Yes.
You will find your voice. It takes a while for all of us to find our voice, but you will find it. And it's going to change over time.
Absolutely.
I listened to episode 2 or 3 of my first show. Oh my God, it was so bad. And then now sometimes it's better. It's not always perfect. But Elsie, thanks for coming on. I definitely appreciate your perspective. I know that, you've got your heart is in this just as much as mine is. How can folks reach you? What's the best way for people to reach out?
Yeah, I think that, if you look at the show notes, I hope, or wherever it is that you're going to put in there, I actually have not a newsletter, but an email list that I'd love for you to join. And I'll just give you a link to that. If you can't find that, you can find me on social and just hit the link in my profile. Wherever you find me, I'm at theelsieescobar.com. And I'd love to keep connected with anybody who wants to just know what I'm up to and whatnot. So you can click that link, or if you do share that on the profile wherever it is that you have here in the show notes.
I should have mentioned it earlier, but Elsie is in the Podcast Hall of Fame. And
Yes.
she is amongst, I think, how many of us is there? 54 or something like that. So, a lady that you can trust. And, what's funny is people say, Todd, why would you have Elsie from Libsyn on your show? And I'm like, I love Elsie. And she gives good advice and has different perspectives. So, thanks for being on. Definitely appreciate it. And everyone, reach out to Elsie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.